Although Reichspräsident Hindenburg thought little of Adolf Hitler, he contemptuously called him a Bohemian corporal, on the 30th of January 1933 he appointed him Chancellor of the Reich. A weakened Weimar Republic, still only governable by means of emergency decrees, had now opened the gates to power for the Nazi Party. Jubilant, Hitler's brown hordes celebrated their successes with torchlit processions and parades. On February the 27th, the Reichstag, Germany's parliament, was set on fire. SS propaganda blamed the arson attack on the communists, although it is believed to have been started by the SS themselves as an excuse to draft a new law, the Reichstag Arson Act. This act now made it legally possible to make random arrests without court judgment, and in the next few weeks thousands were arrested all over Germany. At first it was the political left, the communists and socialists, that felt the brunt of these mass arrests. There wasn't enough space in the prisons to hold all the detainees, and improvised detention camps were erected all over Germany. The Nazi Party also secured the power of the police under the leadership of Heinrich Himmler. Police regulations were altered in order that SS men be appointed police assistants. On the 20th of March 1933, Himmler announced the building of a concentration camp at Dachau. What began as a political re-education camp went on to become a model for all other concentration camps. 2 days later, the first political prisoners were transported to Dachau. A system of terror began which could not be compared with any other system of persecution and punishment. From this place of crime a monstrous reign of terror set forth, contemptuous of all humanity. Heinrich Himmler, a fanatical racist and one of the most powerful figures of the Third Reich, was in charge, among other things, of the leadership of the SS and the concentration camps. In April 1933, the SS took over the guard duties and organisation of Dachau and other concentration camps. Tied in this way to the SS, the camps became a very potent tool to the Hitler dictatorship by spreading fear amongst the German population. Himmler is seen here visiting Dachau concentration camp. He appointed Hilmar Wackerl as the first camp commandant, but he only lasted a few weeks. His successor was Theodor Eicke, a ruthless and unscrupulous organiser who was the first commandant to perfect the deadly system of the concentration camps. Eicke was transferred directly to Dachau in June, after a few weeks' stay in a psychiatric hospital in Würzburg. In 1934, Himmler appointed him the inspector of all concentration camps and later a commander in the Totenkopf or Death's Head division of the SS. Sometime later in his career, Eicke moved into this building at Oranienburg. From here he managed, organised and planned the administration of all the concentration camps situated inside Germany. By the autumn of 1934, the camp's SS guards were separated from the normal SS troops and they came under the personal control of Eicke. He and Himmler saw the SS Totenkopf troops as elite soldiers or as an order within the SS which could be moulded. So Dachau became a training camp for all the SS guards up until 1938.
Also in Dachau wurde sozusagen eingeübt, was später in den großen Vernichtungszentren durchgeführt wurde. Die SS der ersten Jahre des Bestehens des Konzentrationslagers, die mit sehr niedrigen Rängen angefangen haben.
This school of brute force produced, among others, the future commandant of Auschwitz, Adolf Eichmann, a previously desk-bound officer whose terrible legacy was that he was to become responsible for the final solution of the Jewish question. Other commandants of Dachau were Hans Loritz, seen here, third from the left. Alex Pierkowski, another commandant, is seen here shaking hands with Himmler. The punishment and disciplinary orders that were current in Dachau can be traced back to Theodor Eicke, and they were carried out in all the other concentration camps throughout the Reich. The terror methods including robbing the camp inmates of their dignity, as well as encouraging them to spy on and mistreat each other by a cleverly devised system of using prisoners as supervisors. SS tortures were applied to the inmates, such as being hung from a stake or a tree by their arms, which were tied behind their backs, impalings and severe whippings. Former inmate Josef Felder remembers.
Nun, jeder, der da ankam, damals war es so, das ist sicher später noch viel schlimmer gewesen, der bekam, wenn er die Haare herunter hatte und die Sträflingskleidung an, dann musste er zur Kommandantur und dann musste er die Hose runterlassen und sich über einen Block legen und dann bekam er mit dem Ochsenziemer, sagt man in Bayern, den Ochsenfiesel, bekam er nach der Lagerordnung, in der Lagerordnung stehend, 25 Stockschläge auf den nackten Hintern. Und dann haben sie gesagt, 5, 6, 7, jetzt haben wir uns verzählt, müssen wir wieder anfangen. Sie haben meistens die Zahl, die selbst verordnet war, also festgehalten war, überschritten, sodass das Fleisch verletzt wurde. Nicht wahr? Und dann haben sie die Leute ins Revier geworfen.
Once they entered the camp, the prisoners were robbed of their clothes, names and all human dignity. They were given a number and a category. For this categorization, prisoners had to wear a piece of cloth with a particular colour and marking attached to their uniform. The colours and markings issued to prisoners in the main were adjudged on national, religious and social standings. In many cases, these badges were the deciding factor between life and death.
Bis 1938 waren nur Deutsche im Konzentrationslager Dachau. Und in der damals bereits bestehenden Hierarchie standen die deutschen politischen Gefangenen an der Spitze und die Häftlinge, denen es weitaus am schlechtesten ging, waren immer die jüdischen Gefangenen.
This aerial footage taken of Dachau concentration camp in 1945 clearly demonstrated the specific way in which the space was defined. It shows two large separate areas, one area for the prisoners and the other for the prison command. The border between these two areas was divided by a high-voltage electric fence. This topographical layout adopted in the camps can be traced back to Theodor Eicke. For reasons of space, the camp was extended in 1937. A completely new rectangular prison camp with 30 barracks was created. The security measures in the camp were also considerably increased. A Polish prisoner, Felix Rack, registered as number 18425, described the sadness of the camp in a poem he wrote, Dachau in Sunshine. In sunshine I got to know the hell that was Dachau, a camp, a row of barracks, a walled fence, a ditch, wires connected to the deadly electrical current, high towers on which the SS men keep guard at night and also through the day, the machine gun ever ready. Like shadows, the starving prisoners move about. I got to know the concentration camp here. This prison block in the camp was known as the bunker. Political, intellectual and prominent prisoners were incarcerated here. Solitary confinement and abuse were the orders of the day. This is one of the two crematoriums which were situated in the camp. These were known as X-barracks. On this square in front of the administration building, the prisoners had to appear twice a day for roll call every day of the year in all weathers. If a prisoner was missing from roll call, usually due to illness, then the others had to often stand on the spot for hours on end. This is a reconstruction of the prisoners' barracks at Dachau. Each barrack was approximately 100 metres long and 10 metres wide and contained 2 rooms. One was used by the prisoners as a day room, and the other room was used as a dormitory. Initially, each barrack was designed to house 208 prisoners, but by the end of 1944 there were 1,600 prisoners in each barrack. The hygiene facilities were totally insufficient for the number of inmates. At the beginning, Dachau was exclusively a political camp. Even the first German Jews who were interned in the camp had been arrested by the Gestapo on account of their political convictions. Communists, Democrats, Unionists, Socialists and Conservatives had all been fighting each other before 1933. They now found themselves suddenly together behind the barbed wire. Josef Jus, a Member of Parliament, spent almost 4 years in Dachau concentration camp, and he talks about everyday life there.
Immer auf Draht sein müssen, immer wach. Einen Augenblick nur vergessen, wo wir sind. Eine schlechte Laune des Lagerführers, des Block- oder Stubenältesten und wir fallen auf. Werden gedemütigt, beschimpft, getreten, geschlagen. Die geringste Widerrede, ein unglückliches Zucken der Muskeln und wir werden gemeldet, bestraft durch stundenlanges Stehen am Lagertor, in strammer Haltung, in Sturm und Wetter, durch Entzug der Nahrung, durch Stockhiebe. Das niederdrückende Gefühl absoluter Ohnmacht, Recht und Schutzlosigkeit gegenüber toll gewordenen Gewalten.
Johann Georg Elser was a prisoner in Dachau who didn't survive the Nazi terror, being murdered just before the end of the war, having been spared for years whilst awaiting a show trial. On the 8th of November 1939, he'd made an attempt on Hitler's life. Nazi propaganda had tried to make an international conspiracy out of the attempted assassination, although he'd carried out the deed alone. Elsa had decided to kill Hitler during a rally in a Munich beer cellar. Working over many nights, he planted a bomb in a pillar near the podium. At 8:10 in the evening, there was a huge explosion. The ceiling collapsed onto the visitors, 8 people were killed and 60 were wounded, but Hitler was not among the victims, for he had left the beer cellar just 3 minutes earlier. Elsa was later seized by the Gestapo. On cross-examination, he said Hitler's death would have ended the slavery and ended the war. Dachau was the largest concentration camp for the clergy. Churchmen were brought here from all the other concentration camps until finally there were over 2,700 interned from 27 different nations. Before this, Hitler had tried to approach the two main faiths with the intention of monopolizing both for himself to preside over. The victims of these arrests were rebellious churchmen. Catholic priest Herk was arrested for delivering a critical sermon.
Bei uns in dieser Gruppe war Neuhäusler, Niemöller, Höck und dann Hofmeister, Corbinian Hofmeister von Metten. Dann ist er eingeliefert worden, zu uns gekommen mit einem Beamten von der Gestapo. Und dann hat er den Mut gehabt und hat dem ins Gesicht gesagt, so, haben Sie mich jetzt gut abgeliefert hier in diesem Gefängnis, ja. Er hat gesagt, ich danke Ihnen, dass Sie mich lebend begraben haben jetzt, ja. Denn damit musste man rechnen, dass Sie sozusagen, wenn Sie einen reinbrachten, den gar nicht mehr rauskommen ließen und von ihm auch nichts annahmen an Verteidigung, an Rechtfertigung für sein Leben.
The German Christian group, with support from the National Socialist, infiltrated the Protestant church. There was resistance to this. Pastor Niemöller was a figurehead in the movement, whose stance against the Nazis led to his arrest. In 1937, he was incarcerated in Dachau as a personal prisoner of the Führer. Pastor Niemöller survived the camp and was liberated by the Allies at the end of the war. In In spite of the harsh conditions of imprisonment in the camp, some of the clergy still managed to give moral support to their fellow inmates. Prelate Herc was able to give some pastoral care.
Und ich bin dann reingegangen und dann war ich etwa so 2 Stunden bei ihm, haben beruhigt, er war verheiratet, hat ein Kind daheim gehabt, einen Buben, mein Gott, und hat mir sein ganzes Leid geklagt und ich habe ihn dann getröstet, er hat gebeichtet, hat die Kommunion empfangen und am nächsten Morgen wurde er zur Hinrichtung geführt auf den Schießplatz der SS. Nicht? Und das war schon ein Sinn, ein tiefer Sinn, warum wir drin waren und dass wir täglich von Weihnachten, also 41 bis zum Schluss, bis wir dann der Osterwoche 1945 herauskamen, täglich die Heilige Messe feiern konnten.
Barbara Dichtel explains how religious practice and social hierarchy were tied up together in the camps.
Aber auch unter den Geistlichen gab es eine Hierarchie. Es gab die deutschen und österreichischen Geistlichen, denen es schließlich erlaubt wurde, eine Kapelle einzurichten in einer der Baracken. Es war aber wiederum etwa den polnischen Geistlichen, die weitaus die größte Zahl unter den Geistlichen stellte, verboten, an den Gottesdiensten in dieser Baracke teilzunehmen. Und unter den polnischen Geistlichen gab es auch bei Weitem die meisten Todesfälle. Etwa die Hälfte der 1600 polnischen Geistlichen, die hier im Lager Dachau inhaftiert waren, sind hier ums Leben gekommen.
Munich, July the 18th, 1937. The Nazis celebrate the opening of a new German temple of art. Hitler, the would-be painter from the Austrian district of Branau, celebrates a late, if not doubtful, triumph of aesthetics. Mediocre Nazi paintings were the only exhibits to be seen in the gallery. This banal blood and earth art was expected to deliver to the German people total belief in their Aryan roots. Previously, 600 classical paintings had been removed because they were declared to be not art. Taking place at the same time was a festival depicting 2,000 years of German culture. The arrogant superiority of the Germanic master race was put on show. What was now a popular spectacle would soon become a cruel reality. 75 miles southeast of Munich lies Berchtesgaden, Hitler's mountain retreat, nestling 1,700 feet up in the Alps. In this mountain fortress, the Führer withdrew with Eva Braun and his closest followers, protected by his Leibstandarte SS bodyguard. Dignities that Hitler wanted to overwhelm and impress were received here. In February 1938, he met the Austrian Federal Chancellor Kurt Schuschnigg. Hitler forced an agreement on him that would allow Nazi activity to freely flourish in Austria. This culminated on the 12th of March 1938 with the German army marching into and annexing Austria. There was little protest from the Western nations.
Als Führer und Kanzler der deutschen Nation und des Reichs melde ich vor der deutschen Geschichte nunmehr den Eintritt meiner Heimat in das Deutsche Reich.
Almost immediately after annexation, Catholic Austria, under Nazi rule, no longer tolerated Jews. Those Jews that hadn't succeeded in fleeing the country by the summer of 1938 found themselves being rounded up and transported to Dachau concentration camp. On October the 1st, as agreed in the Munich Pact, Hitler marched into and occupied the Sudetenland area of Czechoslovakia. Here, as in Austria, Jews and other unwanted elements were hunted down, arrested and transported to Dachau. In 1938 alone, almost 19,000 prisoners were interred in Dachau concentration camp. After the declared independence of pro-German Slovakia, the remainder of Czechoslovakia was under threat of collapse. This caused the Czech state president to place the fate of his people in the hands of the Führer. German troops began to move into Bohemia and Moravia, and Hitler followed in jubilation. Hitler's expansionist move eastwards, so far without bloodshed, were soon to take on an open form of war.